Hello and welcome to another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show, where this week we are super excited to have Coach Quinten Cooley from Hillcrest High School in Alabama. Coach Cooley's also had stops at Basha High School when they were the Open Division State champions in Arizona, and is a wealth of knowledge. Got to get him on that 30 for, or I think it's 35 under 35. One of the best young coaches around that you will ever see. Great offensive mind. Also knows a ton about technique and different skills like that. So we're really excited to have Coach on. Please, while you're just tuning in here, make sure to like and subscribe. Primary goal of this show is just to grow the coaching profession and get more knowledge out there to as many coaches as possible. So it helps us reach more people if you just do us a real quick favor. It's totally free, does not cost you anything. Like and subscribe to the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show. And like to take a moment to mention the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show is brought to you by schoolfunder.org. Schoolfunder, the only online fundraising company in America that lets you keep all of the money your team raises minus a very small 3% credit card fee. Sound too good to be true? Well, I can tell you firsthand, it is not too good to be true. We did it last year with a lift-a-thon, raised $12,000 in less than 2 weeks, and we were able to keep the majority of that money minus the small 3% processing fee. Number of other companies, you would have had to spend upwards of $2,000 giving them back. You wouldn't give away 20% of your team's victories, so why give away 20% of all that they earn in fundraising? So, everybody, like I said, we're super excited to have Coach on. We're going to start by talking a little ball, and then Coach is going to share with us his PowerPoint here and some stuff on naked and play action, outside zone type stuff. But first question that we always kind of ask, do you think it's most important to tailor your system to your personnel or to coach what you know?
I think it's definitely more important to tailor it to the players you have. I mean, I think I think we always struggle as coaches to um just coach what we know or be comfortable with what we know. But I think at the end of the day, you might be comfortable and it might be something that you're comfortable with. But if your kids are not understanding it, there's no point on putting a square peg through a round hole. So I think it's really our job as coaches to really seek that knowledge. If you know that there's a system or a play or some type of scheme that you know is going to fit your kids, I mean, you got to do everything in your power as the coach to really try to find that knowledge and to really fit your players. So
Absolutely, Coach. Love it. So, next question on here is, how do you feel about scripting? Your thoughts on scripting, things you'd look for in an opening script? Would you do an opening script? All those type of things.
yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, you guys know. I mean, I've been to six different high schools now in two different states. I mean, I've been around the block when it comes to scripting. I've been around some coordinators that don't script and don't like it, and I've been to some places where the OC is he's got his first 20 and he's sticking to that 20. Doesn't matter if it's working or not. I've known guys that have skipped or scripted the first 15, 20 plays. I think for me personally, I think 10 to 15, really get a good feel, to what they're in. I think what is your plan for that week too? I know, Coach McDonald when I was coaching at Basha, he always wanted a plan going into game week. What were some of the things we were trying to attack as an offense? And I think you try to carry that over into the script. So whether that's we want to figure out, how are they going to line up to our base fronts, our base personnel groupings? What front are we going to get? What type of coverages are we going to get with our base stuff? So I think it just depends on what you're trying to do for that week and try to script it to that 10, 15 plays, and just kind of get a feel for the game. And then from there, you guys know, you got to figure it out from there, the chess game. So.
Game planning a typical week and Saturday or Sunday, however you guys do about it. What are things you look for to attack? And are there certain plays you like better against certain fronts? What are the things that you guys do when you're trying to game plan for an opponent?
Yeah, well, I know for Hillcrest, last year was my first year there. Definitely a new experience for me. I know, I mean, we're up there from 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 to 9:30 at night. So we'll spend majority of our time there. Really what it is the coach that I coach for, Coach Mitchell. I mean, he's been doing it for over 30 years. He reminds me of a high school version of Coach Saban and Coach Belichick. So he's very detail oriented. So the first thing that we do on a Sunday, I don't know, a lot of people in Arizona meet on Saturdays, but college football is really big here. So we try to give people Saturdays off and then meet on Sundays. So, but the first thing we do is he calls it the Sunday paper. And basically, he has this photographic memory and this Rolodex of every single mistake that we did throughout the week, and that we have to fix going into the next week. So whether that's players being late, whether that's coaches not doing what they're supposed to do. So it's really just maintaining that consistency and holding people accountable in the building. And I think that's a great mindset to have, but because before you even get to the game and the game plan, right? What do you have to clean up from last week, to carry over? And then from there, we break it down. We'll watch at first, every coach will meet, offense and defense, and we'll go through the entire game, every clip. We don't really split off. As an offense, quarterbacks, receiver, we all stay together. We watch the entire film together. And we kind of get more coaching from Coach Mitchell, and kind of trickles down to us, and then what we need to fix as coaches. And then from there, then we'll break off and kind of go into our next opponent. So, really, this has been different everywhere I've been. He's a lot more old school. We'll sit there and watch the film. You're expected to take notes, just really detail oriented. You have, your certain things that you're looking for. Obviously I coach the tight ends, so, I'm kind of looking at the nine techniques and where they're lined up in the fronts. But the first thing we do is we're a run first offense here. So 90% of what we do is run. So the first thing we're going to look at is fronts, blitzes, stunts, anything like that. And then we kind of break off from there. And when I was at Basha, it was a little bit different. Coach Mack was a lot more, explosive offense, explosive plays, throwing the ball down the field. We had a really talented quarterback. So it was really just organizing. And we did a lot more like Excel spreadsheets and, just a lot more scripting and a lot more organization from, the technology side of things, the percentages and all these numbers and stuff like that. So I think, whatever way you slice it, I think it really comes down to your preparation, uh, from, improving from the week before. And then also what's your philosophy as a program and what's your philosophy as an offense? So you can really, I mean, you can skin a cat a thousand ways. So
I think that's really interesting stuff, Coach. The fact you've been able to learn from so many different guys and seen different perspectives, I think only help you as you progress in your coaching journey. But that's really interesting stuff. This is one that I always find interesting, and we just taped an episode with Brett Davis, who runs the run and shoot, and I asked him, "What does your call sheet look like?" And he said, he just does it off his head and goes to it from there. They got a boundary concept, a field concept, and that whole deal. I know when I first started, we had a runner. We had a guy go in. We usually did it with the receivers back and forth, send the play into the huddle. I'm generally not a big signaling guy. I prefer the wristbands, but number of different ways to communicate. This is a little bit of a two-part question. So the first part of the question is, what does your call sheet look like? Is it the Mike Leach version where it's an index card, or is it the Denny's menu, I think as Dan Casey calls it? And the second part of the question is, what is your preferred mode of communication?
So I honestly, for my call sheet, what we have at Hillcrest, it actually is the Mike Leach version. Coach Mitchell will spend about 30 minutes by himself in his office, and he'll write down the first 20, 25 plays, handwrite them, and then he'll highlight them and color coordinate them with his highlighter. And he's got one little note card looking thing. And then we'll try to print it off as young coaches. We'll try to print it off and try to create our own script from that. But it's very old school, So it was definitely different for me. And it's definitely interesting. I remember the first few games. We're calling. I'm trying to make sure I got the tight ends in and out of the game, personnel groupings, and I can't read his freaking handwriting. you know. So I'm like on the sideline. I'm like, is that green? Is that blue? And then he's dog cussing me on the sideline. I'm like, you know. So it's one of those things where, you know, the old school stuff is great, but sometimes when it comes to the scripts, I don't know about handwritten. So, um, but you know, I mean, me personally, I enjoy, you know, having an organized script. I like to keep everything organized. You know, I'm more of a Google Docs type of guy. I try to have everything lined up. And for me, like I've always, you know, learning this from Basha too, you know, try to have your template already ready to go. And then throughout the week, you know, you see what plays kind of looked really good on Monday. You see what plays look good on Tuesday. And then by Wednesday, you know, you kind of meet as a staff and you decide by then, you know, hey, these are for sure going to be the plays that we're going to be running on Friday night. And you try to add to that template throughout the week. And so that by then, you know, you have your official template right before kickoff and you're good to go. So that's the version I like, but you know, like I said, everybody does it different ways, and you know, that's what I like personally. And what was your next question?
The next question is mode of communication:
Okay.
signal, runner, wristbands. What would you prefer if you had the option to pick?
For me, I mean, I love signals, I love hand signals, but I think, you know, going back to your original question, you know, what are your kids gonna get? I mean, you know, I mean, we struggle with it here. You know, I think you guys know kids, you know, kids today are a little bit different. You know, so if they can look at signals, because I've been to some places where they might know all the signals in the world, but they have no idea what play it is. Or then they know the play, but then they don't know the signal. So it's one of those things, you know, me personally, I enjoy signals, but I think as coaches, you know, we can always overcomplicate them. You know, I know at Basha and even when I was coaching at Hamilton, you know, we always try to keep the signals as, you know, relatable to the play as possible and keep it simple for the kids. You know, I mean, I mean, you guys probably see, you know, on Saturdays watching those guys on sidelines, they got 15 signalers out there holding up play cards. They got wristbands and left hand and right hand. You know, I think as coaches, we always, you know, oversimplify it when it's like, hey, if you gotta dig in a post, like come up with some signal. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's one of those things where I enjoy the hand signals, but I think I would rather have it fit my kids. If they need wristbands, then screw it. Let's print some scripts off, put it in the wristband, and let's go. So,
I like it. Very adaptable. How do you go about, speaking of adaptability, how do you go about tweaking your system week to week?
I think, you know, I mean, every offseason, I mean, you should know as an offensive staff, I mean, a defensive staff, you know, what are you trying to improve from the last year? You know, I think, you know, from my last two, you know, experiences, I think, you know, there's a lot of coaches that panic, right? Whether you had a successful season or you didn't have a successful season or kind of, you know, in the middle there, average season, you know, and you always try to sometimes coaches panic a lot and they want to put in these new plays or they go to a clinic and they like this one thing and let's just run it, let's throw it in. I really like that. You know, but at the end of the day, like what is your foundation as a program? What are you know, what's your foundation as an offense? You know, I think we especially in the off seasons, you know, like we all love, you know, watching Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and all the crazy stuff they do. But do you have a Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey? Probably not. So, you know, I think as coaches, we tend to overcoach and we tend to overplan or we want to put all this stuff in. But it really comes down to what is your philosophy as an offense? And are you sticking to that? You know, and I think as you go throughout the season, you know, if you do find new wrinkles and you do find new things, or, you know, maybe something you wanted to put in the spring, but you knew your kids weren't ready for it. Okay, by week 8, now we can add it in week 8. You know, so I think it all should be based around the kids and what are they ready for and your philosophy as an offense. You know, I've been to so many different offense. I mean, I remember your offense, you know. G was our base play. G power was our base play, you know, and then from there it was power and counter, and we were a power running team. You know, sprinkle some wildcat in there, and that was our philosophy. You know, and I remember, you know, you slowly throughout the year started adding more and more stuff, And I think that is really important, as coaches. Start with your philosophy. What do you want to be? Do you want to be old school power eye? Do you want to be, if you're going to be spread, are you focusing on the explosives and the percentages and how far the receiver is going to be lined up on this concept, so you kind of just go from there.
Love it, coach. Love it. This is always one of my favorite ones. And last couple of weeks, asking this question: if you had just five total concepts you had to put in your offense, what would they be? Five total, run and pass, both. What would they be?
Okay. Uh, Man, it's tough. I would say for me, I mean, I know everybody's, calls it vertical zone now, but it's dive, ISO, it's dive from the gun. That's probably my go-to. So I'll probably start off from there. I love counter. I feel like you always have to have a counter in the offense. Um, I love outside zone. Definitely love that. I used to be this inside zone, think I was a guru, and everywhere I was going, I was, bugging the head coach about putting inside zone in, until I realized that if you don't have a center and you got a nose in front of him and he's going to cross face, I mean, it's not reality. You know what I'm saying? So, but I would say definitely, dive, ISO, I kind of put those hand in hand. I would say power, counter. I definitely love some gap scheme runs. Uh, Passing wise, I love Y stick. I love the RPO off of that. Um, I love, what we used to call it at Basha. I mean, I love, we used to do a lot of sniffer. So we'd have the little H back coming across, faking the split zone and slipping out to the flat. I think that definitely I really love wide shallow. I think for high school kids and for quarterbacks, it's probably one of the easiest things that you can teach, and it's a great concept to have. And then definitely some double cross action. Definitely love that as well. So was that
Love
five?
it,
I hope that
coach.
was five.
All sorts of good stuff there.
Yeah.
Um, we're going to turn it over to you now, coach. I talked to you about when I talked to you about coming on. I wanted to hear some play action, maybe some outside zone stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to you and coach us
Okay.
up on some concepts, and we're looking forward
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah, definitely. Let me pull up, let me see what I have on outside zone. Um, let's see here. Hold on a second. Just a second.
You can start with the naked stuff too. Doesn't matter to me. It's
Okay.
totally
Yeah,
good.
I was just thinking, you always want I feel like you always got to start with the run
Yeah,
action first.
I
So,
got you. I got you.
you know, but let's see here. Hopefully you guys are going to cut this part out.
Yeah, Coach Brusso does a good job with that. I'm not super
Yeah.
skilled in that, but he does a
Yeah.
good job of it.
So let's see here. I'm trying to think. Yeah, we'll just start with a naked boot. All I got to do, and you guys can't even see that. Let me go back to this. Working with a Chromebook over here, guys. Sorry about that.
No
Um,
worries, not a big deal. Like I said, he'll figure out how to cut and paste and all that stuff. We got it.
all right. So, starting with naked, would love to start with outside zone too. I think, with play action, I think, there's so many different ways to run it. I think it's obviously starts with, the run action that you're trying to do off of it. I think for, everybody knows, outside zone, stretch, whatever you want to call it, everybody's gapping away, booting out. So I think it's really important, the first question I feel like every offensive coach has to ask is what are we trying to do with our play action? What run are we trying to sell? What is our base run? Because, I've been to some places where it's been kind of frustrating where we'll do the gap away, zone away, quarterback boots out and rolls out, but we don't run outside zone. So it's one for me. It's one of those things where, I feel like we get so caught up in trying to beat the coach across from us on the sideline, when in the reality we're trying to confuse 15, 16, 17 year olds. And what are you trying to do when those kids are sitting down watching film every week as a defense? It's one of those things where how many times can I get them to see the same run action over and over and over and over, right? And so, what are you trying to do, right? Are you going to be more of an outside zone team, right, selling the boot? And then are you going to be more of a, gun team, running backs running across your face, you're pulling a guard, right? Selling that guard pull. Maybe, college they do it a lot. They'll do the double pull, maybe guard and H back, right? So it's like, what are you trying to accomplish with your play action? And what run actions and what runs do you have to match with it? So, but for naked, I took this when I was at Hamilton. Some of the rules that we did, everything was gap away. Um, we obviously had different techniques for our outside zone, right? Depending on if you were a center, guard, or tackle, but we try to keep it as simple as possible for those linemen, right? Gap away. You just got gap responsibility. We had different terminology for the tight ends and the H backs in the game. Biggest thing on our O line coaching points, right, is pad level was very important for us. And the biggest thing, right, is you still want to take that first step, right? And it all came back to, and I remember, because when we were at Hamilton, it was really about selling the zone, right? Selling that outside zone, selling that stretch, in the gun, under center, right? So making it look all the same, right? That first step, just like that same first step you would do on your regular outside zone, right? We're doing the same thing when it comes to gap away protection. Um, obviously QB, uh, tailback coaching points, you're using some of the same rules, techniques. Hopefully you guys can see, I'm not going to read everything, but, using the same rules, using the same technique in the run scheme, selling the run. Nothing frustrates me more, and I think for all you guys, right, is not having a back that gives a good fake, right, or not having, when the quarterback is actually handing it off and on zone, and he's not booting out backside, right. So giving that same run action and just repping that every day is super important. But we would have, everything was based off of, Paw and Rhino. We'd have Texas, so this was kind of our, out of the gun. Right, we would have our H back right here. Best thing, for me, I feel like to teach that is, he's selling his zone steps. He's 1, 2, 3. Okay, so he's foot fire, 1, 2, 3 when he makes contact with that guy. And the most important, the thing I think is the most important on selling that little flat route is you once you step, you're now using your forearm to your outside hand, your forearm to your outside shoulder, and you are pushing off this edge defender right here, right? And that's going to take your momentum with you to go flatter down the line. I've seen a lot of high schoolers, a lot of H backs or tight ends or whatever you want to call it. They almost just two hand touch the guy and then they reverse pivot out, right? I mean, sell that run. I mean, put your face in there, smack that edge defender, use that forearm, push off of them, take your momentum with you on your pivot out. But we have our crossers out of that. We had Hooters and Stallion. So, you know, for Texas, that was more of our inside zone type of look. You know, Stallion was more selling our outside zone look. And we just had, the crosser coming off of it, tailback going across, quarterback booting away from it. Very simple stuff. So, just different looks here. Now we have it from under center. So the one thing that I do love that I wish more teams did, and Hamilton was great at that, is a lot of times the tailback. I mean, what are you teaching the tailback once he sells the run? Obviously, giving a good fake. And the one thing that we always did great with at Hamilton was just sending this guy on a wheel, right? Sending that guy on the sideline, sneak him out of there. And you never know, man, that quarterback, his last option, and he sees that guy all alone on the sideline, right? I think always having something extra for that running back, especially when he's done with the play fake, is really important. So, I'm trying to see.
Those are great. I love your points with the tight end coaching points there because it's such a, I don't know if it's undercoached or the kids just don't want to do it, but you're right. They just kind of want to play patty cake and then spin on
Right,
out of there. And great
right.
coaching points there on using that, really selling the run and you're naked, I think is good stuff. And I can't tell you, boot throwback or naked throwback, however you want to word it, is nasty. We have
Yeah,
had weeks where
yeah,
we had to spend too much time away from their base and be
absolutely.
worried about that throwback.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the coaching points that I wrote it down over here, but I wanted to talk about is I think it also like obviously me and you are offensive line guys, we always want to start there, but then the next step is the quarterback because for me, I feel like if you don't have a quarterback comfortable under center and having his back turned away from the defense, then this shit ain't gonna work. Sorry for the language, but I mean, because like let's be honest, like there's not like the quarterbacks are so used to gun, and just being able to see that defense in their face every single time, when you go from the gun and you go from this and his back is turned away. I mean, there's so much A gap pressure now, and if bear looks or I don't know, everybody calls it double mug, whatever you want to talk about it, walk up guys, you know, it's one of those things with quarterbacks. Is he comfortable enough to be able to turn his back away for a few seconds, sell the fake, turn back around, and especially if you got, like on this picture right here, you're zoning away. This guy's now unblocked. If you don't have a quarterback that can do that under center, then why are you doing it? Again, going back to the square peg round hole, if he's not comfortable with that, then don't waste your time with it. Then it goes back to if he's more comfortable having the defense in his face, he can see what's going on and he can still roll out and make the throw. I mean, I'd rather do that. So, and it's hard. It's hard to find quarterbacks that can have their back away from the defense and still, sit back there, gain their width and gain their depth. And, I don't know how many times I've seen quarterbacks just get skittish to that end man on the line of scrimmage and they want to start running farther and farther back and throw off their back foot and stuff. So, but I think it always comes down to offensive line and what your quarterback's comfortable with.
Love it. All good stuff there, Coach. How do you guys? We've used a little bit on our nakeds. We called a stay call. If you get this, I think what you guys are calling a dog safety outside backer in the 3-4. If he's walked on the line of scrimmage, do you delineate whether it's a full naked or because we used to have, for example, if the tight end here had the Sam walked up, he would base the Sam and he's telling the tackle if the stretch fake was going left, that he's staying on the man on
Right,
him, and then the
right.
tight ends release him because if they both go, you're going to have a guy completely free. Do you guys delineate that, or how do you go about teaching that?
Yeah, yeah. I know. At Hamilton, they gave a lock call definitely, and I love that too. I think it's easy to put in. Um, I think like I said, I think it's harder, to do that under center because that B gap's going to be left open. But I think I do love the lock call. It's definitely something you could always put in. Um, and like I said, it depends on what your quarterback's comfortable with. But then also going back to, what is your identity with play action, right? If you're trying to sell the run, right? That's why you have all five guys gapping away and trying to sell that run action as much as possible. Um, but I know at Hamilton, I know a lot of teams are doing that now with RPOs locking that backside end or that walk up guy, just reading that second level defender. But you can do it either way. I've done it both ways, and I like both. So I think let me go to let's see here. Get out of here. All right, I'm gonna have some play action stuff we can talk about, and then I'll show you some of the stuff we do, some of the stuff we do at Hillcrest as well. Let's see.
Sounds good.
So just some things, I've kind of some that I've, done a lot of Basha stuff. Not everything we did at Bash was on here. But the one thing, talking about play action, if there's any non-play action guys or old school running teams on here that are listening, I think I really like what Sark's doing at Texas with his play pass. I'm sure you guys have heard that before. If you're not really a play action team and you're more of an RPO team, I mean play pass I view it as another variation of play action too. But just some of the play pass stuff that I've been a part of, like just selling that ISO, right, vertical zone, whatever you want to call it, right? And then it kind of builds off from there, selling, like instead of selling the run, you're selling the RPO more. You got true RPO, fakes in the backfield, mesh, like really riding that thing, right? So you got some, obviously, you got your corner post there and a crosser and real simple stuff, really harping on, especially with this wise H back right here, right? Really harping on selling, right, his normal ISO block right here and then working flat. The same thing with the running back and quarterback, right? Selling that ISO run action heavy. Um, and then obviously kind of goes from there. Like I told you guys, from the double cross action as well. Obviously, it depends on how long you got to block. I mean, it's a little, if you're got a guy at high school trying to run to 18 to 22 yards across the field, are you going to have enough time for that? Probably not. So you got to adjust to, how deep you want your routes to be. Um, but
This is one of my
I mean,
favorite concepts, that deep cross and the home run post or corner post. A lot of people call this Yankee, I know, but this is one that I think we've gotten some mileage out of. Big. Do you consider this a shot play, or do you teach the quarterback bottom down, top down? How do you go about teaching that progression?
I definitely teach top down. Top down. I think that it's just the easier read for him because I think, if the corner post isn't there, he can immediately get his eyes down to the crosser coming underneath that. So, and then obviously, he's got his little outlet. I mean, you got an outlet on both sides, but, one, two, three. I think the biggest thing too is teaching this crosser right here on the backside with the Z. It's one of those things where it you really have to get a high school kid to understand that it's a feel thing, right? And so what a lot of coaches don't understand, how you get a really good rub action is you teach this D right here. Okay, you're trying to get, like, if you see the J right here, the slot, right? You're trying to get to his heels. So as he's going across, he might be a little bit deeper, right? But you're going to get more of a cross action if I can. Hey, you're right behind his heels. You're trying to follow his heels, right? And you're trying to get that depth on the route and then settle back down, obviously, once you pass the J. But you really can create some separation if you're trying to, and it's a really good landmark for you, right? And it's one of those things where I think with double cross action, I mean, it's one of those things where am I really worried about how deep they are? Am I, like, obviously we don't want it too shallow, but I'm also trying to create that separation, especially if it's man. I'm trying to create that separation from the defender, right? So the more space I can create away from that defender that's trailing me. I mean, as you can see here, stair stepping away versus a man defender. I think that's really important too. So
Love the coaching points there, the details, all super important stuff on these
got some old school
concepts.
mesh on here too. Got some called the railroad. Got the running back wheel out the backfield.
That's
But
become
like,
so popular now.
yeah, we can talk about it if you want. But yeah, I mean, definitely, we ran a ton of it at Basha. Instead of having this, the sit route here, this OTB route over here, we were on an over route. We teach the tight end, obviously a little bit different formation here with 2 by 2, but we teach the tight end that was on the ball. That outside backer, you're trying to get to his outside shoulder. So we teach the tight end on that over route. He's climbing. Right, still get to your 10, but you guys know he's gonna linebacker right here is going to try to wall it off, and we're trying to fight to get to that outside shoulder, right, and just try to wall this off to all the defenders, and then he kind of goes over to his over route. But yeah, man, it's definitely a deadly play in high school. And I know people teach different. People, they'd rather teach the mesh first and then go back to the running back. I think the best way is to read the running back first. You go to one to two to three, however you want to do that. But yeah, I love it. You know, but got a drive concept here. Tailback coming across the face. Definitely a cover two beater. Um, obviously, this is kind of more of what we did at Basha. A lot of times we would have, instead of having the out, we'd have the corner. Sometimes we do a post, whatever it is, we'd have a post and send the fullback out on the wheel. And you can do a wheel both sides if you want. Kind of depends on what your kids are good at. Um, let's see here. Um, Trying to think what else I got.
All really good stuff. What would you say has been your most consistent or highest percentage play action concept?
I would say honestly for us at Hillcrest, I'll try to pull that up for you guys. And I know quarterbacks love it. I know our kids love it. Let me see if I can pull it up. But we call it saying really what it is just a post curl. You got a crosser with the slot or the tight end, and then you got a flat route, and you could have a comeback or MOR on the backside. Let me see here.
I'm with you though, the play action stuff is every time I go through and I break down our data from the end of the season, we have very few completions in drop back. I mean, we have a lot of quick game
Yeah,
completions, but very few in straight three step in the gun or five step under center
right.
completions that way.
Yeah, and I honestly, I think it goes back to the quarterback. I mean, I don't know how your quarterbacks are, but are they comfortable with turning their back? Are they comfortable with that, especially if there's pressure, coming and they got pressure and all that stuff. But let me see here. Um, let's see. We got 1,600 plays in our playbook. It seems like actually that's what it says. So, all right, let's see. Coaches, don't forget clean out your huddle. All right.
That does become we've had a few different guys in there, and our I've tried to go back and like you said, clean up some stuff in there, but I think we're over 1,000. Obviously, not
Yeah.
1,000 concepts, but a whole
Right. Oh,
bunch
I
of
know.
different ways to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And everybody seems to be. I should do. We should do a podcast on that. Everybody is married to their verbiage.
I know,
I'll
right?
tell you what. No matter what, everybody's locked in on how they communicate the same thing. So
Yeah.
I always find that interesting.
So this is what I mean. This is our version. We call it Saint. Um, we got we'll have we call orange two back, 20 personnel in the backfield. We'll sell the run action here with the T. I'll see if I can find that in a few minutes. But we'll have the fullback back here. He'll go to the flat. But one of my favorite play actions right now is definitely the post curl. Got a crosser route and then just a simple, shoot route, flat route to the, running back tailback. And then you could obviously add on to that with the tight end. You could have the tight end involved with the crosser. We do that as well too. Obviously backside. I mean, whatever type of clear out you want to do, or you want to come back, have an extra option for the quarterback. But I know at least for me, and I know our quarterbacks love it. Just this window that this creates with the post curl and that crosser going across. I know the kids love it. It's a simple throw, simple read for the quarterback. So, but definitely something that I'm really liking right now, especially with play action. So,
Coach, walk us through a little bit, just a little bit here. We're a little pressed for time, but walk us through a little bit of your outside zone in terms of aiming points for the running back, what you're teaching as far as the read, and I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole, but maybe a little
Right.
bit of your footwork for the offensive line as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've done it so many different ways. I think like I mean, everybody has their own version. I feel like of teaching zone. I've done 70. You got the 45-degree step and the 70 step, and then I've been to places where they're telling us 77 and a half. So I try not to get too crazy with my degrees with high school kids, but I try to keep it simple. I think for me too, like if you're not running inside zone or you're not running vertical zone or dive or ISO, then why are you running outside zone? That's just me. It's one of those things where it's a marriage, right? Because I think if it's the same thing with power and counter, or if you're more of a front side guard pull G power. I mean, I think they got to go together. So that's just me personally. I know everybody is different on that, but again, you're trying to sell it to high school kids. You're trying to fool a high school kid on defense. They're going to overcommit if they keep seeing outside zone, and maybe instead of hitting B and C gap, now I can hit A gap. So, but the first thing I do is obviously if it's inside zone, teaching that 45-degree step. Outside zone, I try to take flatter step, 70 degrees flat down the line. I've always trying to aim for that outside shoulder. I know at Hillcrest right now we're a little bit different with our um, outside zone. We're more of a pin and pull deal. We'll reach play side. If you're uncovered, you'll pull. We're more of old school head speed, taking that bucket step and really simplifying that to just bucket and run. I mean, we teach those offensive linemen, you're taking that lateral step and you're getting your big ass out there and you're trying to fight to get your head on his outside shoulder, his outside of his helmet. And then obviously I've done it where you're tacticians and you got the aiming points of you're stepping inside toe, you're stepping inside crotch with that second step, and you're vertical driving on your third or fourth step. Um, there's so many different ways to run it, but I think for me personally, I think especially if you have big offensive linemen, I think if you have just 300 pounders, I think the easiest way to teach those guys to really get out there and move, I think especially for the big guys, is if they're not knee benders and they're waist benders and they can't bend their freaking knees, you know what are you like? How are they going to get out there? So sometimes I feel like the bigger the offensive lineman, I just got to keep it simple for them. Like, look, man, bucket and run. Just get your big ass out there. Go fight for that outside shoulder. Right, reach them. Second step's important. But sometimes with those big guys, if you try to over teach the footwork and the technique, I mean, they're going to be second guessing themselves, and especially if you got a walk up five that's super athletic, I mean, they're never going to get there. I think if you got some smaller guys that have to rely on that technique, then you can be, tacticians with your technique. And I think that's important for those smaller offensive linemen, so I think it's adapting to the kids that you have. Are you going to have kids that are going to understand a 77.5-degree step? Like, so it's one of those things
I
where
don't think I understand what that is.
exactly. And I mean, I had this head coach one time, and I'm not going to give names, but out there teaching 70-degree step, a flat step, and I'm like, I don't even know what 77.5 is, but hey, all right. So, uh, but anyways, so if you're confused if you're confused as the coach, you're probably confused as a player. So,
That
but
makes
yeah, yeah, man, it's outside zone is one of those tricky things. Are you going to overcomplicate it, or are you going to try to keep it simple for some of those kids?
Do you prefer, last question, coach, and we'll get you out of here, but do you prefer sidecar in the gun outside zone, under center, more downhill outside zone? Do you have a preference on that?
Uh, I'm a huge fan of the pistol. I think I love under center stuff, but for me, I feel like it's hard to find a quarterback that can really operate that. The one good thing about under center is I feel like you get a better play fake for play action, roll out, boots, whatever it is. Um, but for me, I love pistol. I think sidecar. I think you're very one dimensional. I think if you're in the pistol, I think it keeps them guessing a little bit, and that's why I like it personally. And you know, it's just one of those things where can I keep those guys guessing, right? What side is he going to, right? And a lot of times, I mean, you guys know defenses are going to set their fronts and everything, especially if you're a spread team, they're going to set it to the back. So now, if I can be in pistol, can I get an even front if he's in pistol? That's going to be easier on my offensive lineman too. So.
Love it, Coach. Well, we really appreciate you joining us, giving us some knowledge, all kinds of great play action passes, and some really cool concepts. And we'll definitely be following Hillcrest. And hopefully, we get some folks in Alabama watching this episode and like and subscribe to the show if you like what you see. We try to get as many coaches on as we can. And if you're interested in being on the show, you can contact me, Cody.Collett, Cody.Collett, at PrescottSchools.com. Thanks again, Coach, for joining us. We really appreciate it, and good luck to you this upcoming season. Congratulations on many of the great accomplishments you've had already. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week on another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show.
All right, Coach, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Coach. Have a good one.